Alright, now in this video, we are now going to handle the login and registration components within our application. So in this tutorial, we're going to create the login and the registration part of this application. So now where we're going to begin, before even we go further, in the last video, we just began with the Vue, and I noticed something that we had when we installed the Vue, this code was white. I believe some of you saw this. That is, if you checked well. Now there's an extension here which is called Prettier. So Prettier Code Formatter, you can install this extension. The moment you install it, is able to detect the Vue.js code, and then of course it is able to add the format for the code that we are working with, and this in this case is Vue. So just come here to the extensions and then look for Prettier and then install it, and then you're good to go. All right, so before we continue further, we created these components here, which we are going to deal with them later. So we have the add product, edit, product details, list view, and so forth. So we are going to come back to this and add codes, whereby we are going to, that is to create this CRUD functionality. But for now, let's leave them for now. Let's first deal with the login and registration, which is very important for any Vue application. Now remember, you need to have the Laravel application running, because we dealt with the last video we discussed about, that is in the Laravel part, we discussed about the Laravel authentication. So we used things such as Laravel Santa. If you have not watched that video, you can go and watch it. Now, so now let's handle the authentication within Vue. So the first thing we're going to deal with here is creating something that we call a store.js file. And this store.js file is going to create, in other words, you're going to create what we call a Vuex store to handle the authentication of our application. So this will allow us to check whether the user is logged in from any component, even including the navbar. So this is what I'm talking about. So when you go to Vue documentation, and precisely when you go to vuex.vue.js.org, there's something we call Vuex. If you have not heard of it before, what it does is that it is able to handle the state of our application. Now, what do we mean by state? That means, for example, we have something that we call mutations. So mutations are basically just functions that you use. Is basically the way you update a state of your application within Vuex. So what will happen here is that, looking at this, you can see here we have, for example, state, and then we define this particular keyword here, which is count, and then we give it a value of 1. So what will happen is that when we use mutation here, we are able to define this particular function keyword here, which is increment, and then we call the state, which is this one here, and then here now we mutate the state by incrementing the count value. So what will happen is that when we increment the count value, of course, it's going to add up itself. So here it's just going to detect the change, and then the count will be incremented. So that's how mutations work. And you can also pass a payload to mutation, that is additional data within the mutation itself. So if, for example, you can see here within the state, we can also add n, which will be presented by this number, which of course stands for a number. So basically, that is on the mutation. So mutations, basically, they deal with the state of our application. And then now we also have what we call so I'm explaining these two because are the ones that we're going to use in our application. We have what we call the actions. And what actions will do is that actions, since mutations deal with the state of the application, the actions will commit the mutations. So committing, this means that it will execute or run the particular mutation. So here we define the state, count 0, and then the mutation here, whereby it is able to determine the state of this count by incrementing this count, that is state.count. And then here on the actions part, here we are now going to define the increment, pass it with a context, and then now we are going to commit this mutation by calling the increment here, which is now the one which has this state, and then now we are able um, to execute that particular action. So you may want to come and check more about this in this documentation here. Read more about they also have nice videos on the same, whereby they explain to you well about the actions and mutations. But in this application, I'm going to explain to you further how I have used it so as to create the login and registration of our application. So let's head back here and then I will explain more further on the same. So I want us, before we create the login, actually we can just come here on the components part. You can just come here. Actually we were supposed to create this in the last video. So you create the login.view, then the other part is create the register.view like this. Now once we have these two created, remember now we are going to write code in them. Now for our store.js here, what I'll need us to do before we do anything else, let's first install the Vuex, because Vuex, remember, it is a state management library for Vue.js, and for you to use it, you need first to install it. So here I'm going to run npm install and then Vuex, then at next like this. So here what we're going to open here is that now we're going to have it installed in our application. All right, so let's give it a minute. All right, now we have the Vuex installed. So once now that is installed, what I would like you to do is to come on the source. Now within the source here is where we're going to create the store.js. So here I'm going to create this. So store.js, and we're going to have it created like this. Now within the store.js, as I've said, we are now going to create it is going to handle the state management of our application, that is for login and registration. Now the first thing here I'm going to do, I'm going to import the create store here, and then we are going to import it from Vuex. So Vuex create store function is going to handle the create store for us. And then the next thing here, actually we are going to install a router so that we can also work with our router here, because here I'll need to import a router. So let's just do this quickly. So let's install the router so that now we also work with it. So let's quickly install the router. I just forgot about this. This is also very important. So npm install. So you're going to run this command view, and then here you're going to have a router, and then add next. So that's what we have, and then let's install this. So this will take a while as well. Now since we have the router installed, so now this is what I was meaning. So on this part here, we are going now to have this. So we are going to import the router from our application. So we are going to have import router from that is from this router here. And the reason we are doing this is that we import the router so as to control the routing actions within our application here. So we import the router, and as you can see, the router is found. We have what we are going to create. Actually, we should just create it here. So on your source here, just create this router.js. However, we are also going to handle something within the router.js. So don't worry about this. All is going to be connected well. So let's import the router from the router. within our application, and we have installed the router. So here the other part here is just to create the Vuex store. So here I'm going to have this export default. So export default, and then we're going to call the create store. Where is it? Here. So create store here, going to have something like that. Now on this first part of our create store here, we are going to define something we call a state. Now when you come back to the documentation here, there's what we call state here. And this state, what it does, that it's like for example, you have a toy, and then the toy has it has mutations, it has actions, and mutations could be, for example, let's say the toy has a button which has on and off. That could be the mutation. And then the action is when a kid accesses that toy and he wants maybe to turn the to press one of the buttons of that toy. So that becomes the state. So the state basically is now that toy. So here, what we mean here, as I use that scenario of the toy or the analogy, is that we are going to define a state object which is going to contain all the reactive data that we want to share across all the components. And this reactive data is when the person is logged in and when the person is not logged in. So for example, logged in, log out, and so forth. So that's what we have here. So here, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to define this state, and then here I'm going to have that. So here I'm going to define this function, and actually we are going to define it as we continue. So I'll show you where we'll call it from. So here I define is logged in, and then I check the local storage. Here I call get item, and what item am I getting? This is the token I'm getting from the, remember in our Laravel application we were able to come up with a token using the Laravel Santam. So this token is the one that we are going to access from our server, and then once we access it, we are going to store it within our local browser here. And I'm going to show you when we'll be accessing the settings here, that is within our browser. So let's just continue. So we are getting that token, and then so that is so we get the token here. So I need to have that one there. Now here I'm going to define a mutation, and as I've said, the mutations are just functions that directly mutate the state. So here I'm going to have a mutation, and then this mutation here, what you're going to have is that I'm going to give a state. Remember, we have said the mutations deal with state within our view here. So here they just deal with the state here. And what state is this? The state here is when the person is logged in. So we are going to define one state here. So I'm going to give this as this way. Then here I'm going to have state. So I give this one as a state. Sorry. So I give this one as the state here. So this is what we have. So I give this one as the state. Now the state here, I'm going to call that state I've just passed in within that logged, and then I'm going to call is logged in, and then I'm going to give this one to be true. So what I'm doing here is that I'm defining one of the state, and this one is going to observe when the person is he logged in, it is going to be turned on. So here you can give it, for example, on. So remember the analogy I've just used, the state here is the toy. For example, say we have this is a toy. So the toy has on and off. And then we have, so the mutation here is just the button here, which has the on and off. So here we could have this one as the button, like this. So I want you to understand this using this analogy here. Now, so once we define that, now here we are going to go to login, and sorry, not login, because we have already defined the login. We're going to go to the logout. So this is caps, and then the logout, you're going also to pass state. So this is a state, and then here we're going to have it like this. So on the logout, you're going to also to define state dot is logged in, and then here, if the person has logged out, of course, it's going to be false. That's what we are going to have there. So that is on the mutation part. So here is just on. Remember our button scenario. So on and off. Remember, this is the state here can represent the toy. Now, so once that is done, we now need to go to the actions, and then the actions here we're going to have, I'm going now to define the action. Remember, I've said the actions, they commit the mutation, and from our documentation here we have the action part. Actually, this concept is very powerful when you are building large applications. This is very powerful. So here we have said, for example, you can see here we use context.commit so that we can commit this mutation here, whereby we have defined the increment and we have passed the state. So here I'm going to have this login action that commits the login mutation here. Let me just bring this one down a bit. Okay, so here I'm going to have the login, and then here the login, I'm going to pass these two curly braces. Then here I'm going to have the commit, and then the commit here we have the, I'm going to commit this using, so here I'm going to pass the login like that. All right, so here we commit. Remember, I've said now here the actions here could present the kids who are now playing with this toy. So here the mutation here odds, for example, the instructions. This one is just holding the instructions, and then here the kids here can decide either to turn this on or off, and actions here are the kids who are able now to commit that action here. So that is the whole concept behind that part there. So here I'm going also to commit the, that is the logout action that commits the logout mutation, and then I'm going to use something we call a dispatch, which is going to lead us to navigate.login action. So when you look at the same concept here, we have what we call dispatching actions here. So because now we are now done with committing the mutation, here now we need to dispatch the action, and dispatching the action here is actions can be triggered with, for example, now when you call store.dispatch, we are just now dispatching that action, and of course it basically means we are just now executing the different action here. So here we are going to have the logout, and then here within the logout here we are going to pass that commit, and then here we're going to have dispatch. So once we have the dispatch here, we are going to have the commit. So what is the commit? So the commit here is going to be logout like this. So when the person logs out of this application, and then lastly we are now going to dispatch this this action here by making the person to navigate to the to login like this, and that's what we do. So basically here, once the person is once the person has now logged in, and then we also have another one, so the person to log out. So the dispatch here, which is navigate to login, will now navigate him back to login page of this application. So that is what we have on that part. So let me just copy this. Now lastly here, once the person is logged out, here now we will direct him to log in to the application again, whereby I'm going to call the router dot push, and then here we have this. So here we have name, and then here we have the login, like that. And this login, of course, we are going to create it within our application so that the person can be logged in. It can now be turned to the login page again. So as you can see here, we have just done the commits for login, logout, and then we now send the person back again to log out of this application. Right, guys, so that is it on the store. So this store is very important because the reason as to why I wanted to start with it is so that we can now handle the state of our application, so that we can handle this place when the person is logged in, logged out, and so forth. Now I want us to head over to the router.js, and we're going to create several items here. So within this router, we're going to have this import, and then here I'm going to have create a router, the second one here. So create a router, and then here within the create router here I'm going to have create web history, and then from router, just like the way it is now, it's defined itself. Now once we have that, now here the next part is just to import several things that we are going to deal with. Now here, for example, here I'm going to import the login, which is the login component. So I'm going to import login from this. So here we're going to have the components like this, then slash login dot view. Remember, we have this, we defined it. Now, so the import login from components slash login is of course this one, because you can see it is on the source folder, and then the dot just stands for the source folder and so forth. So let me copy this one and paste it here for the register. You're also going to do the same thing like that, and here I just need to change this to register. So once I have these two, the next part I'm going to create here is what we call a const, then routes. So const routes, then this equals to. Now here, what I want to do here, I just want to define the paths for the different login and register, and we're also going to come back to add product, edit, product details, list view, and so forth. But for now, let's just define for the two. So here I'm going to define the first thing, and it's going to be path, and the path is just for our login. So where we can find the login, so it is in caps. So here I'm just going to define that for login, and then here I'm going to set the component. So the component here is login like this, and then down there we're going to have this meta, which is going to be. Now, what do we mean by meta? Meta means that here, when I say I define meta here and then I define true, it means that here I want to mark this route as, let me just add this comment, mark this route as public. So it means that I want this route to be accessible on the public, because the person has to come to the login part so that he can now be logged into this application. So here I mark this route as public so that the route can be seen. But once the person is logged in, you see, for example, when the person is logged in, he is unable to access is only able to see the logout, right? And as well as now, when he's not logged in, for example, these other routes for add product and details, we're also going to add a meta, but you're going to make them false so that when the person is not logged in, is unable to see them. Now I'll copy this, the same thing here, and then just down here we're going to have for the register, and you're going to do the same thing. So you're going to do this, you're going to make it true, and then here I'm going to have register like that. Okay, and then now here, now once we are done with that, the next item is just here we need to add this semicolon like that. Then down here, what you're going to do here, I'm going to define const, which is the router, and then I'm going to call the create router. And then here, create router, and then what we have here is this. So here I'm going to have history to create web history. Should be this one here, and then here just have this, and then lastly is the routes. Now this part is the one that is defining here, because here we want, of course, when the person navigates to any route, this is going to handle the history of the routes that the person goes in and out. So here we need to have that one as defined. Now when I create const router and then equals to this history and then web history, down here I'm going to have this item here. I'm going to have router before each, then inside I'm going to have this to from, and then next, and then I'm going to have this. So now this one is going to be, when I define router before each, to, from, and next, is so that we are able to check the different routes within our application. So when the person goes to we are going to check if the person is, for example, is authenticated. Whether if he's not authenticated, then we don't allow him to access the particular route. So that's why we want to undo this in this part here. So the first part here, I'm going to have const, and this const is going to check if the person is authenticated, like this. So check if is authenticated, which is equals to these two signs, local storage. So local storage, of course, here we just want to get the token or local storage. So here we check if the user is authenticated and if the token is stored. So that is very important for us to do that. Now down here, I'm going to add another if statement here, which is going to go to, and then dot meta. Remember, the meta is the one that we have just defined here, which is setting whether the route is public or not. So is to, and then meta, and then here we're going to have dot public, like this. Then here I'm going to have this to, and then is authenticated. All right, so we have that, and then here we're going to have this. So here once we check, so here what we mean here is we check if the route is not public and the person is not authenticated, of course. So this is what this part means. If the route is not public and the person is not authenticated, then we are going to redirect him to the login page of this application. So here we're going to have next, and then here we're going to have a name like this, and then here we'll have this login, which we have defined so far. And then once we direct him to the login page, or else if the person then has the right credentials, then we'll allow him to navigate to the next part of this application. So here we just call the next. We just have next like that. So this one is going to be this way. Then down here we're going to have export default like this, and then a router. So here we have this in this way. We do have an error on this part. So here, this one, we need to have it as 1. So this one needs to be 1, and then so that now it comes to close on this part here. So this is what we have so far on the Router.js, and that's what we'll need to work with so far. So then now the next part, we can come within our login.view and start something here. Now we are on the login.view. So here we are going to have a template, and within the template here, of course, is where we define our HTML within our any Vue.js application. So we're going to begin on the first part here. I'm going to create sorry, you're going to create a div class. Let me take this one out. So I'm going to create a div class like that. This div class, because I'm going to add some CSS, I'm just going to give it a container like that. And then here, down here now, let's begin with something here. Now here, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to define a form. So I'm going to have this like this. So form at submit, and that submit dot prevent. And then this one equals to login. And then here we're going to have, we're going to have a class which equals to login form like this. Now what I mean here, when you have so this is the form. Now what we are doing here is that when we define in any Vue.js application, when we define submit at submit.prevent, what we mean here is that the form will be submitted, and then we are going to trigger a login method which is going to be triggered, and then the dot prevent, which is a modifier, of course, it will prevent the browser behavior, that is the default behavior of the browser, which is a page refresh. So here we are just avoiding a page refresh. So that is the whole idea behind this concept here. So that is the main idea behind here. So here we have this is equals to login. I don't know why I have an error here, but we'll correct it as we continue. So the next part here I'm going to have is input type, and input type here is equals to email. So we are allowing the person to input email, and then I'm going to call vModel, which is email here. Then of course here we're going to have a placeholder which says email, and then required is going to be called as well. So the required here, and then we close like this. So the vModel is used for two-way data binding within our Vue.js application. When you talk about a two-way data binding, is basically it's going to observe any input that is going to be given by the user, and then it is going to update. Whenever a user keys in a particular input, then the vModel is able to detect that and update the component. In other words, the form, of course. So here, we're going to have another input type. This input type is going to be equals to password. And then here we're going to have a vModel. So the vModel here is going to be equal to password, like that. Then of course we're going to have a placeholder which is going to say password, and then have the required, like that, and then we close this that way. Now lastly we are going to have is the button for the submission. The button type here of course is going to be submit, like that, and then here we have the login. Remember, this is what is within our Laravel application when we created that place whereby we have the email and password. So we are just now creating so that this can be identified within our Laravel application, sent back to the form. Now this error is going to disappear as we introduce the rest of the code. So here I'm going to have the script part within our Vue.js. Now the script part here, what you're going to do here, the first thing here is to do an import of the Axios. Remember we installed Axios sometimes, that is in the last video. So here I'm going to call the Axios, and should be able to identify it, okay, because you already have it installed. So here Axios is now going to make HTTP requests within our application. So the first part here we'll have is export default. Remember we created the export default for example, when we created it within our Router.js. So the work of export default is to make this to be available to the rest of our application. So the rest of our components. So that's what export default does. So the first part here we're going to define is a data, and then this data, what is going to do here, it is going to return a given data. So we're going to have this. So here, so what data is that? The data, of course, is the email and the password here. And that's what so we initialize the form input data, which is now the email, like this. And then down here, we are going to have a password like that. And then here, we are going to have this. So once that is done, we have that one, and then we have that. So next is to have this extra one, should not be there. Actually, should be there, but okay, we're going to have it. So, alright, so inside it is where we're going to have the methods. So the methods, you are going to define them there. Now, what are the methods? The methods are the ones now which are going to handle, we call them asynchronous methods, which are going to handle the login process because we are in a login.vue. So here I'm going to define the async. Then this async is going to be async login, which is now the function there. Then we're going to put them in a try block statement, whereby here we're going to define this. So const response equals to await. Remember, async goes with await. If you have watched some of my tutorials, I've done a tutorial on this. So here we're going to have that. Okay, so here we have this, and then we are not supposed to have that one there. Sorry, I didn't. Okay, so here const response, so it is going to await. So the await here is just to ensure that we are contacting the server, and then when you contact the server, we await the response so that now we can validate the credentials. So here we have email like this, and then here we have this dot email, and then here we have password. So here we have this dot password like that. Then once this is done, let's close this like this. Now down there, we are going to have something. So once we have that done, we're going to have now. So here we are now checking the checking the user credentials to the server validation. So we are now identifying that, so that once now we send this for validation. So the next item here is just to have an if statement, which is going to call response dot data dot token like this. And then there we're going to have a local storage, which is going to set item, and then take the token like this. So here we call the response dot data dot token like this. So what we are doing here is we store the token in the local storage for session management, because here what we have done here is we have requested for these two for validation, and then once we request this for validation, now we identify the authentication. We check for the authentication token within the server response. Once we check the authentication, because we are validating these two, and then of course checking the token, then now we store that token within our local browser, so that now we can uh, uh, access it, so that we can ensure the person is well authenticated. Now this next part here we're going to have is what we call this store. Remember, we already have a store, and then here we are calling a commit, and then within this commit here we call this login like this. So what we are doing here, the update stores state. will reflect the user's logged in status. So here we want to look at the from our store.js here. You can see we are checking the status here. Remember, the mutation is all about the state. So here we check the state. Is the person logged in, which it should be on. So if the person is logged in, then we are going to allow him to access the rest of our application. So here, sorry, this is small. So here I'm going to have this dot at dot router, and then here we call dot push like this, and then this simply we are now allowing the user to navigate to the home page. So that is what we have on that part, and then here we are going to have this catch block in case there are any errors within this part. So here we get to type any errors to our console, which is very important. So this error could say something like this: an error occurred. So that is what we have on this part here. So here, how many should we be having? So here we have this. We need to close this way, this like this 2, and then here I believe here we had how many? So from the start here we have these 2, and then we have this one here. So here we need to have, here we need to have one more. This actually I've just discovered this error is coming from here. So this one needs to be closed. That's this way. And then down here you need to have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you need to have 4 of them, and you're good to go. So this is now the login view. Down here we're also going to add some styling, but not now. So now let's head over to the register.view. Now within the register.view we are going to have the same items. That is what we similar to login, but just some few changes. So here we're going to have the div, which is going to be the div class. We're going to give it a form container like that. Now within the form container here, okay, so let's now begin with the form after that. So here we're going to have at submit, and then remember at submit is dot prevent, which is equals to, so we are calling the register method, and then here we have class. So class here is register form. So we are going to use this one to style it. Okay, so now we have that. So here now we are going to have 3 input fields: the name, email, and password. So name, email, and password. So some of these they are similar to this. Actually, I may want to copy this too, that I don't keep typing them. So you're going to have this. Let me push this a bit. So the email, then so we're having the name. So the first one here is going to be name. Let me copy that one. So here I'm going to have name. Then the V model here is going to change to name. Okay, so the placeholder of course is going to be name like that, and then the rest are going to be the same. We're also going to have a button type here, just like this one that we had here for the register. So we're going to have it there, and this one we're going to change it to register. So that is our form with our 3 input. We have the V model for the data binding, as I've just spoken about. So down here now we're going to go to the script part. The script part here we're going to have is that we are still going to import our Axios, the one that we imported here. So I'm going to just copy it and then have it there at the start. And then here we're going to have the export default, which is this one here. In the export default, we are still going to have the data. In the data, we are going to have a return. So what we are returning here is just the the three fields, the name, email, and password. So this is just a data model for the form inputs. So here we're going to have this. So I'm going to have this, then email. So after email, we have password. Sorry, I must have this, and then this one is going to be that way. And then here we'll have, so down here, we're going to have the methods just after this. So the methods here that we're going to have is, so we are still going to use the async method that I've just spoken about. So the async now this time is going to be the register. Here we are going to have the try block. So what we're going to start here, we're going to make a post request to the register endpoint within our Laravel application with the name, email, and password as data. So what we're going to do here, we're going to define this const response, and then we're going to call the await. So the await, and then the axios here, and then the axios.post. So here we are now going to the register endpoint like this. All right, so this is what we have. This one is going to close later. Let's have this. So the first part we're going to have is name. So we're going to call this name, and then here we're going to have, let me just copy this. So this one is going to be email, then this one is going to be this dot email, and then this one is going to be password. Now once we make this post request to the register endpoint, now the person will be registered, because now once we make this the async register, and then now it does the axios. We are using the axios to do that. So now we get to register that person within our Laravel application. So it is just as easy as that. Now once, if for example anything goes wrong, it's always good for us to show errors. And before we do that, let's close this one like this. Then now let's go to, after this one here, in the catch block here, I'm going to pass this keyword error here so that we can check on any errors. And now what we're going to have is that if there are any errors, we are going to print them within our console dot error. And then here we're going to say an error occurred. So we have something like that. And then here we call the error. That is, we pass the error for us. So once that is done, we close this. I'm also going to add an if error here dot response like this, and then here we're going to have something like this. So let me copy this one here and paste it there. Now what we're going to do here, we're just going to say this. So here we're going to have the error details, and the error details we're going to call them with error dot response like this, and then dot data. So here we're just outputting out the errors that we have within this application. That is, what are the details of the errors that we have? Then you're going to have. So this should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you're now going to output them within our console. So let me see here. We need to have, so this one, you need to have this, and then close it that way. So that is our register.view, and that's what we expect within our register view. Now, once that is done, we only have several items remaining, such as, so the navbar is now the next part here within this application. So here we now need to establish a navbar, which we already did we create? No, we did not create. So we need a navbar so that we are now able to navigate through these different routes here. So I'm going to create a navbar here, and I'm going to call it navbar.view. This navbar here is the one that now we're going to use so that we can navigate in our application. So I'm going to add the template there, and then inside it I'm going to have a nav, the two of them. Now this navbar are going to be based on if the person is logged in or not. So we're going to start with what we call a router link, like this, and then it's going to a particular place. So for our login and registration, we're going to have something like this, logged in, that is log in, and then we're going to use something we call if within our Vue.js, which is going to check if the person is logged in or not. So we're going to use is logged in, like this, and then we close that, and then here we now pass the link, that is the navigation link. So here we go to the register. So the other one is for the register. So we're going to have this. So within the register, we're also going to check if the person is registered within this application, like this. Now we can also add these pipe signs. So it's just to make sure the two links are distinguished together. Now the last part is just to have the logout. So here I'm going to add an href with an hashtag, and then this logout is going to go to @click. So when the person that is when you click the logout button, the click will call the logout action, and then it will call the logout button so that the person will be logged in. Remember we spoke about this one within the state, when the commit state, when the person is logged out. So that is what we have there. So logout, and then here we have the if. So if is going to be is logged in, like this, and then here we close this. Then here we have the logout, like that. So this is very important. So we just checking this and then ensuring the person is, we check if the person is logged in or not. Now within the script here, we're going to handle something very important. Remember we are dealing with we are using Vuex. So here what I'm going to do here, let me import it at that place. We are going to import two items we call map state and map actions. And what map state and map actions does is that it enables it will enable us to convert what we call computed properties. For example, this one makes our code to be a bit cleaner. So when we are using map state and map actions, what we are doing is that instead of using things like such as, for example, $sign this dot something dot. Now what this is what this when you use this dot something, it means that you are calling a particular variable directly within your application. But in the Vue.js, when we use, that is in Vuex, when we use the map state and map actions, what we mean here, we are avoiding calling these variables directly within our application. So we don't want to do that, but we use this Vuex helpers to map the logged in state to our computed property. So that is what we are doing. So here I'm going to have these three dots, and then here I'm going to have the map state there. Then here I'm going to have is logged in, like that. And once that is there, sorry, there's something we forgot here. So on top here, what you're doing, because we are converting this map state is logged in to a computed property, we're going to have, of course, the export default like this. And then here, let's have this before we do anything. We're going to have going to have the computed property like that. And then here I'm going to take this and then I'll paste it here, because now we are converting this map state like this to a computed property. Remember, map state, map actions are Vuex helpers, so you just need to know that. It's very important. So here we close this like this, and then here we're going to have another methods. And what we are doing here, we are using the map actions so as to, which is a Vuex helper, to map out the logout action to a method. So in this case, here we are defining the methods, and then here we're going to define map actions like this, and then inside it we're going to pass the logout functionality there. And that's what we have within our navbar, whereby we have the export default with the computed, and then we have the methods. There is logged in and is log and logout. And the reason is, I've said, we are using map state and map action is to make the code cleaner, to avoid us accessing our variables directly within our application. So that's the whole idea behind the map state and map actions. So you may want to check this within our Vue.js documentation here. Actually, everything has been captured here within this documentation here. I believe they do have. So this should be, so you should be able to find. So you can see it's already here. So this is the whole idea here. Right, guys. So now the last two parts is just to update the main.js and the app.vue. So within our app.vue, we are going to have something like this here. So our app.vue, so I'm going to get rid of this like this, and then here I'm going to, so here I'm going to call the navbar that we just created like this, and then here I'm going to, so let's have a space there. So down here I'm going to have a div. So this div is going to be div id, and then this is equals to app like this. And then here I'm going to pass the router that we just created. This router, I'm passing the router view in this part here. So this is just down after the div here within our template. So this template needs to come here like that. Now on the script part here, what I'll do here is that I'll import the navbar. So I'm going to import the navbar, and then the navbar is going to be from navbar.vue like that. Then export default, there we're going to have this. So here I'm going to register the navbar component within this application here. Now I may not need this. So what I'll need here is this. I'll need this navbar here like this. And then here I'm going to have this, so that down here I'm going to give this as app with this, and then the script is going to be that way. Now when we do this is that we ensure that we are passing the navbar, we are defining the id app, which is our HTML, that is our HTML elements, and then the router view is the one that is going to pass the different routes, and remember they are the ones that we created on this part here. So these are the routes that we created here. Okay, so what else do we need? And then here we have imported the navbar from the navbar.vue, and then the components that we are importing here is of course the navbar, and then here we are calling our app like that. Now there's this part for main.js, and there's something we need to do there. Within our main.js, we are calling the create.app from Vue, which of course we have imported. So then we have app, which is from app.vue, which is okay. Now the next part here we need to do is let's close this one. That's like this. So here I'll need to have this. So here I'll need to import store, because remember we created store. So I need to import store dot store from where it is like this. So here we are, this one we are just importing the Vuex as store. The other one here that we want to import is, let me copy this one and paste it there. It is the router. So we import the router there. Then the router here is going to be Router.js. So here it's Vue router. So we import the Router.js. So once that is done, let's do something here. So here I'm going to have this. Let me, before we do the create app and then the mount. So here let's create a Vue application instance. So for example, I'll have something like this app, then this equals to create app, and then inside here I pass app like this. Then app to use, here I'm going to pass store, and then now this one, what we are doing here is that we are creating a Vue application instance which is updated, which is an updation of Vue 3. So we are registering Vuex store and Vue router within the application. So when you say app.use store, we are registering the store, the Vuex store, and then when we say app.use and then a router here, we are now registering our Vue router like that. And then lastly here we are going to mount the application to an HTML element within our application. So you need to have this set up in this way for this application to function correctly. All right, guys. So let's run this application and see. Now, as we are running this application, take note of the register view. Remember here it is going to this endpoint. Last time we did a base URL. So what I meant here is that instead of us repeating this way, whereby I have to copy that and then add it where? Add it here. So for example, I do something like add it like this. So since I don't want to do this, that's why I created the base URL here. So we just have that one like that. So that's the whole purpose of base URL. So here I need to run npm run serve, and as well I need to also to have my Laravel application open, because we are also going to use the Laravel application so that we can now register somebody within this application. So this is our Laravel application. So I'm going to start PHP artisan serve. So I'm going to have it running. Actually, I should have opened the new window. I just closed the other one. But let me just open it again. Let's run it. All right, so now we have our view started, but I can see we have errors. Now these errors are brought by ESLint. Remember we installed this one at the start. So it is, for example, the first error says component login should always use a multi-word. Now this is not necessary, because basically it means that, for example, you can have something like user login, user register, something like that. So that's what we mean by multi-word. So to avoid this, what I'll do here is that I'll go to view. We have this file called view config.js. What I'll do here, I'll just use this module.export, and then here I'm going to give it a lint on save, and then here I give it false. So here I'm just disabling the ESLint, which are still important, but then for this application, this is lint, should not be this one. It's lint on save. So let's Control C. Let me run this again. Let me just open this server again. Let's run this. Okay, so npm run serve so that you can compile it again. Now you can see it has combined, but the errors have just disappeared because I've added this line of code. So what I'll do here is alt click and let's see if all is working well within our application. We can come to the console here and check what error we are getting. So we can we have lint on save. So here this is set to false. So what we can do here, since we have set it on false, we can right click and go to inspect and check from our dev tools what are the errors we are getting. So when I go to the console here, try to run this again. So the error must be here. So the error is coming from, let's go to main.js. Now main.js, so what I need to do is that I need to have this app. So this app.mount, what it is doing, it is mounting the application to an HTML element with the ID app. And of course, this is what, remember app.view is the one that is responsible for rendering our application. So it is rendering it as an ID because the initial one that was there, I deleted it and I used this one. So here, so this must be the error that is coming out here. So you can see here now what we are able to get login and register. So here I can click on login and then I can click on register and I'm able to navigate on the two. So now let's try to register. Example, Brian. Then here we have Gmail, brian@gmail.com and then password. Let me just give password like this and then let's try to register. Now we can go to the inspect here and try to see what is happening. So let's go to the console. So what I'm getting is that error could not establish a connection. I believe my Laravel is working. Now, as I'm inspecting these errors, as you can see here, so what I've noticed here is that the issue with the course policy is that my Vue application is on port 8080, but here I had set it to 8000. So what I need to do here for them to match, I need to have them within the same localhost so that the domains are not different. That's the whole idea of the course policy. So that this error will now disappear when I run, because this is on port 8080 and this is running on localhost 80, now 8080. So both of them. So when I log in with my details, you can see now here I'm successfully logged in and we can refresh this. So this error should disappear. Now I can log out, but as I log out, I can see there's an error here. So the error says name login parameters. So okay, so this means that it cannot find the name for login. So let's check our router.js. So here I can see I forgot to add this. So we need to add the login like this. I can copy this as well and add it to register router path, and then see what will happen. So here I have this two and this two. Okay. So now let me try to log out again, and I can see I can log out and log in to this application, and as well I can log out and we don't have any errors. So those are the errors that were there. So the name needs to be there. And then if you don't want to have the ESLint issues, you can disable this one by adding this part of the code. And then on the issue of the course, you need to set your Laravel to run on the same port or on the same domain with your Vue.js application. Alright guys, so now in this video we have successfully managed to create a login and registration, and be able also to know something about the Vuex, which I highly recommend you visit the documentation to learn more about it. And then so in the next tutorial we shall now be finishing up with the rest of the components. Remember, add product, edit, and then product details, product list dot view. So when the person now gets logged in to this application, is now able to see what is inside this application. So that's what we are going to do. Actually, without forgetting, we can also add some styling for our register and also our so let me do this quickly. So for us to add this, we are going to come up with something called style, and then it's going to be style scooped. Then here I'll paste this styling here. This styling here will enable us to handle the styling for this application of ours here. So we are just setting for example, the form container. We set it to display flex, justify content center, and then align item center and so forth. Just some styling. So I will have a documentation for this entire Laravel and Vue.js 3 so that you can reference this styling here. So I believe when I save this and run this, we can have this like this. So that's what we have, and we can also do for the registration like this. So for the registration, we shall have something like this. So let me just get it. So here, what I'm going to do here is, here I'm going to have style, then it's going to be scoped like this. Then you're going to have this in this way. So here we also set the form container display flex, justify content center, align item center, register form display flex direction column gap of 20, width, padding, border radius, and box shadow, and so forth. So so that is for the register page. So here when we log out, can register this application here. Right guys, and I believe there is validation here. So that is now on this application, and remember there's something else actually I'm forgetting to show you. Now when this person gets logged in this application, for example, when you navigate to the login and then we log this person in, what we have here is that when I go to sources and then we go to sources, then go to application, and then go to local storage and then local host, you can see here the token that we created within Laravel is now this one, which is now stored within our browser here as the local storage here. Remember this, we did this one when we made the login. This is what we have here. So you can see what we came up with here, whereby we said once the login details and are been validated, then let us store the token and retrieve that token. That token will be now used when you are navigating through any component within our application. Alright guys, so let's meet in the next video.